Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Our guest today is Leopoldo Lopez. He is the founder of the Venezuelan opposition party Voluntad Popular. He joins us from Madrid. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you very much, Mark.
A month ago, you fled the Spanish embassy in Caracas. You're now reunited with your family. You spent 4 years in military prison, a year and a half in house arrest, and another year and a half in the Spanish embassy. You had always said you wouldn't leave your country. Why such a change?
Well, as you say, Mark, I never wanted to leave Venezuela. In fact, in 2014, when I presented myself voluntarily to an unjust judicial system, I made the decision to go to prison and not to go into exile because I was convinced that our fight from Venezuela, even from prison, would contribute more to the fight against the dictatorship. I spent 4 years in military prison, then, as you said, 3 years between home arrest and the embassy, and now I reached a conclusion that I could be of more use, more effective in our fight against the dictatorship and towards freedom from exile. And of course, I'm physically here in Spain, but I have my heart, I have my mind, I have my attention in Venezuela, because I am absolutely convinced that the first line of effort that we need to contribute to is in Venezuela, maintaining ignited the light of hope towards freedom, that it's always in jeopardy to be deposed by Maduro. So we are focused in going forward with all of our effort to move and mobilize the Venezuelan people.
Right. Obviously, the fact that you left the embassy, it was under surveillance, this begs the question. It means either the regime is not competent to watch one of its main enemies, or that you benefited from maybe assistance, if not from the president himself, maybe from people in his close circle. Can you answer that question?
No, that's absolutely not true. I did not receive any help from anybody, not even from the people that work in the Spanish embassy. I planned myself the way I was going to go out. I spent a month and a half overseeing the movements, the timing of the custody around the embassy. There were at least 20 people around the embassy, in the front door, in the back door, all around the embassy. And it took me time to do the planning. And of course, we did this with a small group of very committed people. We planned the best way to go out, and we took the chance that there was an opening in the quarantine in order to do some disguise. And we were able to manage this operation successfully. But it was on our own. We planned it and we executed on our own the operation of leaving the embassy and going away from Venezuelan territory.
Right, which is a kind of humiliation for the regime.
Well, it has happened before. There has been different political prisoners that have allowed themselves to leave their imprisonment. So, yes, with regards for the reaction of the regime, they imprisoned around 15 people after I left the embassy. And this was a clear response to the fact that I was able to leave without them knowing.
Right, but politically, isn't this to their advantage? Don't they think that if you're far away in exile in Spain, politically, you disappear for them?
Well, it depends. It depends of what I do. And as I said before, I'm physically here, but my heart, my mind, and my actions are in Venezuela. And I contribute and will continue to contribute to our fight in Venezuela. So today, being in exile is not the same thing as being in exile in the 1950s, which was the other period in which Venezuelans and leaders had to fight against a dictatorship. Today, we can be in exile, but in real time, coordinating and being with the people of Venezuela. And that's what I'm devoting most of my time to. And also, I can devote time to promote the message of President Juan Guaidó to other world leaders and parliaments and NGOs and media, just as yourself, in order for our cause to be known outside Venezuela. Because it's very difficult, and in a world of pandemia, and in a world with much of the attention of the public opinion inwards to each country of how they're dealing with the pandemic and the economic crisis, we need to make our voice loud, clear around what is happening in Venezuela and what we need and hope from the international community, which is very clear and concrete. We need support in order for Venezuela to hold free and fair presidential elections.
Right. In the meantime, there are parliamentary elections called for on December the 6th. The opposition has decided to boycott them, but isn't this handing all the keys to power to Nicolas Maduro?
Well, it's not quite an election what is taking place in Venezuela on December the 6th. It's a fraud, and this has happened before. In 2017, the dictatorship called for an election for a constituent assembly, and it was fraudulent as well. And the world did not recognize the results. In 2018, Maduro elected himself again in a fraudulent election, and it was not recognized by the world democracies. And that gave way to the recognition of Juan Guaidó as the legitimate president of Venezuela, with one concrete and single mandate that gives the Constitution to the interim president to promote and organize presidential elections. So this is not an election that what is taking place. We want elections. We want to participate, but participating in a fraud in the terms that Maduro is presenting to the Venezuelan people, it would only help to legitimize Maduro, and it would really not help in any way to be closer to ending the nightmare of the tragedy of Venezuela. Because I want to be very clear on this. Venezuela is going under several crises simultaneously. Of course, the origin of the human crisis, which is the most important crisis that we have to deal with, a country that cannot feed 2/3 of its people 3 times a day, that it does not have running water, no gas, no electricity, no possibility of having access to any services. That's the reality in which Venezuelans are living today. Is the consequence of a dictatorship, of a political model. So the only way in which we can address a solution for the humanitarian tragedy that is happening in Venezuela is if we promote regime change. And we believe in a regime change through free and fair elections.
Right.
So that is why we are asking for the support of the world to be with us, to be with the Venezuelan people in making all the pressure that is necessary in order to have free and fair elections in our country.
Let me ask you this, because you said we want regime change. Back in April of 2019, you and Juan Guaidó tried kind of insurrection. Some called it a coup, trying to get the military to support you. You were reportedly betrayed by some people who said they would support you. But this begs the question, weren't you advocating force instead of the democratic principles that you just laid out?
No, the event of April 30th was not a violent event. It was not an event that went to the presidential palace with promoting a confrontation. It was an event where the people, Guaidó called for the people to come out and support military personnel and police personnel that were supporting the proposal of a transition and free and fair elections. And that was the plan. That's what we wanted to increment the level of the crisis that was happening in Venezuela in 2019. That has not changed.
But that has not worked. And there are many questions about whether what you're doing works.
Well, I can tell you something, Mark. This is not about the opposition. This is not about the democratic sectors. This is about a dictatorship that has held power with brutal means. So this is not an issue of what we have done. We have made mistakes in the past. But the fact is that Maduro is still in power because he's a brutal dictator. And you cannot forget that. And the world cannot forget that. And this is not me saying this. Nicolas Maduro has been signaled as responsible for committing crimes against humanity by the UN. He has been signaled with very specific crimes, violations, sexual abuse, incarceration, arbitrary detentions by the Commission of Human Rights of the UN. So we are absolutely clear in what we are facing. We are not facing a government. We are not facing a process that will determine the level of support in the public opinion as it would work in a democracy. This is something very different. This is a fierce and brutal dictatorship that we are facing. And this is a dictator that has used all his power to create alliances with different criminal organizations like the guerrilla, like narco-traffickers, and all sorts of criminal organizations that today are living and working from Venezuela and that are affecting not just the region, but are influencing the rest of the world.
Just very quickly, as a last question, are you calling for more sanctions against Nicolas Maduro and his entourage?
Yes, I believe that there needs to be more pressure, and I believe that European sanctions specifically should be directed towards those people that have been signaled out as responsible for committing crimes against humanity.
That's Nicolas Maduro himself.
And Nicolas Maduro himself. He's the head of the band. He's the head of this criminal enterprise. And we are calling for the list of 46 people, including Nicolas Maduro, to be sanctioned by European countries. And this is a list that is the result of an examination that presents concrete events, names, victims, dates, and specific details that lead to the conclusion that these people have not only committed crimes, but have ordered crimes and violations of human rights. So yes, we are asking for more pressure and more sanctions to those who are responsible for violating human rights. And I believe that France, being the heart of human rights, and Europe being always the first promoter of human rights and democracy in the world, need to continue to pressure for free, fair elections that will only happen if pressure takes place. Maduro will not give away free and fair elections without pressure. So yes, that is why we believe that there needs to be an escalation in pressure from the free world with a very concrete objective, which is to promote free and fair elections.
Leopoldo Lopez, I want to thank you very much for being on the France 24 interview, and thank you for watching it.